I consume a lot of creative media, from anime to music to books, fashion, culture, architecture, you name it. And I do this because it gives me a new perspective. I'm also into stuff like chess, psychology, and human nature. Yeah, the so-called INTJ stuff. I have experienced a lot of creative media since I released my last video on The Stranger by Albert Camus. I finished that book and I liked it. The main character is very indifferent to morality and religion hell. He might be indifferent to life itself. I really relate to that. I'm also extremely indifferent to many things. And I see people caring so much of the things that I'm indifferent towards that it makes me think, am I doing something wrong? I don't feel bad or anything. I have kind of a superiority complex, maybe because of my looks and intelligence. I also read literature on psychology and philosophy, and most of the time, people are just stupid. Shoot me. I don't care, and it's the truth. Alright, now we're gonna talk about movies. I watched a few movies this past month. I love Wong Kar Wai. I haven't watched all of his movies, but the ones I saw are In the Mood for Love, Fallen Angels, and Chungking Express. I like each and every one of them, but my favorite, however, is Chungking Express. I can't find the words to describe this movie. It's just regular people living their life in 1990s Hong Kong, but the way they are living, it's just magical, especially their acting and their personality. There's nothing profound in this movie, and the movie is not trying to be anything profound, but it's a very chill movie with pure vibes. My favorite part is definitely the cinematography and the choice of music. The cinematography is so beautiful and just so gorgeous. It captures the daily life in such a beautiful way. Also, California Dreamin' by the Mamas and the Papas and Dreams by Cranberries are the perfect choice in music that fits the environment perfectly. Also watched Whiplash, which came out in 2014. That too was a beautiful film made for perfectionists. The acting is amazing, even though I think the main character could have become better if he just left that teacher in practice by taking his time, because he clearly has the talent to make it big, I guess. The teacher does notice that the kid has talent, but he just wants him to improve quickly, hence the crash. But let's be honest, the movie would have been very boring if he slowly improved and become a big name in jazz. That's the creative curse. Alright, anime. Watched Fate Zero, and it's profoundly amazing. Spoiler ahead, basically, the plot is that there is this Holy Grail war that is going to happen between 7 mags and their servants. These mags are high-class magic users in the anime. These servants come from the past, and they are heroic spirits, at least some of them are. These servants are like you have summoned Alexander the Great or Genghis Khan or Marcus Aurelius from the past to fight your battles in the Holy Grail war kind of thing. Any heroic spirit could be summoned. And whoever wins the Holy Grail means whoever is alive till the end can fulfill their one wish. This wish is only for the mage and the mags, and the servants are chosen by the Holy Grail itself. So the main character named Kiritsugu Emiya has a wish that he is going to ask the Holy Grail to end suffering in this world altogether if he wins, and his philosophy is to sacrifice anything if it's going to constitute the greater good. I'm not going into his life story, but after one tragic incident that happened in his childhood, he became like this rationalist without giving much thought to morality. And I'm saying about him like this because he was a very moral and good kid in his childhood, but then his suffering starts, and it just never ends. He has suffered so much and has lost so many precious people that he has kind of gotten numb to all this. He still has a wife and a small daughter, which he does not want to lose at all in this war. That's why he plays this war very ruthlessly and Machiavelli-like. Don't get me wrong, he's a very moral person. That's the reason why he sheds blood. It's a paradox. When asked, why are you playing this war very treacherously, he just answered, because, to end all the suffering, he also upset many heroic spirits by playing this way. Because, you know, they are heroic spirits, and they don't like to play from the shadows, but surely all his suffering would end by winning the war, right? Absolutely not. When he won the war and asked the Holy Grail to end all the suffering, the Grail just said, it can't be possible. And after that, it exploded and caused death and suffering to a whole city. He could not even protect his wife. he lost his wife in the war, and if I be more specific, he has to kill his wife with his own hands, not because he hated her, that would be a good ending, but because he has to. His daughter also became evil at a very young age by that evil spirit, and also falls victim to the next Holy Grail war that is going to happen in the distant future. Many mags and their servants, upon meeting Kiritsugu, told him that his ideal is stupid or doesn't make sense. In this series, every character has a fixed ideal, and they don't want to change their ideals, and they suffer because of it. I think there are two messages that can be learned here. The first is, to keep improving, have ideals, but also don't fixate on them too much. Everything is better in balance. The second message is that an external thing cannot save you or end your suffering. We have seen this in the case of Kiritsugu. He believed that the Holy Grail would end all his life's suffering. No, only you can end your suffering. This anime is a tragedy, like a Shakespearean tragedy. It's epic and profound, and has such good animation and fight scenes. I have only talked about Emiya here, but every character in this anime has so much depth. It's just amazing. And I highly recommend this anime. The animation is top tier. I love the fighting scenes and the animation very much. Also watched Look Back. It's an anime movie based on a manga also called Look Back. And the author of the manga is Tatsuki Fujimoto, creator of Chainsaw Man. Tatsuki Fujimoto wrote this manga as a self-portrait of himself, and damn, the movie was so good. My only complaint is that it should have been longer. It's only an hour long. The plot is that our main character's name is Fujino, and she is really popular in her school because she has a creative talent for drawing good manga. She draws for her school newspaper, further popularizing her among other students. They are in 4th grade at this point of the story. Then she starts seeing that some other student named Kayamoto also starts drawing for the school newspaper. And this Kayamoto girl doesn't come to school because she's socially awkward. Then Fujino observed that their manga art side by side was not even comparable, because Kayamoto was just really good at drawing. After that, Fujino shut herself up and just drew constantly for a year. She finished sketchbook after sketchbook, avoiding all social interactions and friends, and just draws and draws and draws. After a year, she again signed up for the school magazine. And when she saw that she was still not better than Kayamoto at drawing, she quit drawing manga altogether. Then her grade school graduation happened, and her teacher asked Fujino to deliver Kayamoto's graduation certificate to her house because Kayamoto is socially awkward. Upon meeting Kayamoto, Kayamoto told Fujino that she liked her art style, like the way she drew manga. She even took an autograph of Fujino on her winter coat. This filled Fujino with joy, and they became friends and started drawing manga together. Fujino draws the characters and plot, and Kayamoto draws the background. They work together for the entirety of middle school and high school. Fujino helped with Kayamoto's social anxiety as well. They finally signed up for a major manga publishing company, and their manga is set up for serialization. The publisher told both of them that they could start their serialization after they completed their high school. Fujino was very happy, but Kayamoto had other plans. She wanted to pursue art in a good art college. They both fought and got separated. Fast forward a few years in the future, and now Fujino is one of the major names in the modern manga world. Her manga is doing mad numbers. She's very successful, but there is a shadow of loneliness around her by the way they animated that scene. Then one day, while drawing her manga in her expensive studio, she saw the news that a man attacked a major art college in Tokyo with an axe, and the casualties have not been reported yet. This caused a rush of anxiety in Fujino's heart. She called Kayamoto on the phone, but there was no answer. Kayamoto died in that incident. Fujino was silently devastated. Then after Kayamoto's funeral, she thought, what if she never met Kayamoto and actually saved her life when the attack happened? After asking that question, she realized that she still would have worked with her no matter what. This movie is great. I watched this movie when I was very sleepy, and having finished the movie, I took my afternoon nap, and I just kept thinking about that movie in my sleep. And I know that this movie is going to stick with me for a long time. The animation is chef's kiss. It describes the emotion, expression, and body language so well it's crazy. According to my interpretation, this is a very personal art of an author. As you might have guessed by now, both of the characters are part of one person, Fujimoto, like Fujino plus Kayamoto is equal to Fujimoto, which is the name of the author. Fujimoto really liked art when he was younger and wanted to pursue that, instead of manga. And I also think that Kayamoto dying represents the author leaving his passion for art, or, I should say, killing his passion for art and choosing the more commercial option. Either way, the movie is fantastic and amazing. I really like the part and the way they animated the scenes where Fujino just worked on her art for a year by sitting on her desk and just drawing. I love the aesthetic of the way she looks at the desk while working. That's why I also set up my desk that way to work like that. It's amazing working and writing like this. The other anime I've watched recently is Beck. The plot is simple. There is this middle school kid named Koiki who met Ryosuke one day, who was a former band member and who was looking for members to form his own band. I'm gonna keep this short, but they finally formed a rock band, and it's a very underground rock band, so they are not very well known at all, and yeah, it's a journey of them immersing themselves in music while keeping everything in budget. Everyone has a part-time job in this show, and faces very difficult challenges while making it big. Every character has depth, and they have a reason for why they're doing this thing. The main character, Koiki, constantly gets bullied in his school for his music, and just horrible things happen to him. But I like his attitude in all this chaos. He's just calm and figures something out, and if he doesn't figure something out, he tells them that he didn't figure anything out and gets beat up for that. This anime is made by Madhouse Studio, which is my favorite anime studio of all time. Also, this gives me Banana and Paradise Kiss vibes. The music is pretty amazing as well. I love how they suffer so much just to create music and perform, because if they just decided to leave music, their life would be 10 times better. But leaving music is like leaving their soul. Their life would be empty without their art. I can't describe everything here, because most of the high points in the show come from performances, their music, and their suffering. So I recommend you watch this. It's a very good anime. Also, I like how calm and chill this show is, no extra noise or anything. It only does what needs to be done. Books. I have read The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde as a January book read. I'm reading 1 to a maximum of 2 books every month. Yeah, I'm slowing down on my reading lately and trying to absorb the book more properly. I say The Picture of Dorian Gray was definitely an interesting read. The plot is that there is a painter named Basil, and he has a friend named Lord Henry, short for Harry. Basil met Dorian Gray, a young, 20-year-old boy with the most gorgeous and youthful face ever, at a private party. The way Basil describes Dorian was very homoerotic and almost even like a god. Probably that's why, when Oscar Wilde took his book to the publisher in 1890, the publisher censored his book very heavily. I have read the uncensored version, and yeah, the way Oscar Wilde writes is very beautiful, that the beauty has to be censored because most people would not like it because it's out of their comprehension. At least this was the case in the 1880s anyway. The painter Basil admired Dorian Gray so much that he wanted to paint his portrait. Of course, when you see that kind of beauty in a society, you would worship it. Anyone would worship it. Now, at first, Dorian has a very boyish, youthful, and naive kind of personality. He would sit for Basil, and Basil would paint his portrait. One day, Dorian came to Basil's studio because Basil wanted to paint his portrait on a big canvas. Basil was talking to Lord Henry at the time. So naturally, Lord Henry also gets the opportunity to meet this fine, young, youthful man named Dorian. How do I describe Lord Henry's character? He is my favorite person in the book. He's very artistic. I love the way Oscar Wilde describes Lord Henry's words. The way of his talking and philosophy is very artistic. The way Lord Henry talks is very peaceful, very beautiful, and poetic. But he is a very self-driven, meaning, I would give you an example. Whenever something tragic happened in Dorian's life, he would talk to Lord Henry. Lord Henry would give him a positive perspective, but the perspective always puts Dorian Gray on a pedestal. So Lord Henry's influence changed Dorian Gray very much. The painting that Basil painted for Dorian Gray, he gave it to him for keeping. Then when Lord Henry met Dorian Gray for the first time, he made Dorian realize that his looks will fade away and he will grow ugly and old when he's older. And there is a very detailed passage of Lord Henry saying these things to naive Dorian and making sure he understood it pretty well. This is the start of transformation of Dorian Gray. He was a very naive boy when he was only under the influence of Basil, but when he met Lord Henry, everything began to change. It turns out that the painting that Basil made of Dorian Gray for Dorian Gray would show signs of aging, and all the sins that Dorian Gray commits means Dorian Gray would not age himself, but his painting was to age for him. He can look beautiful all his life now, but remember, every sin he's gonna do is to be showcased in the painting. Only Dorian knows about this fact, so he hid the painting in the storeroom of his house so no one would see his portrait. After that, he fell in love with a girl named Sybil Vane, who was a poor girl who acted in a humble theatre. It's a very rundown theatre, not very handsome at all. She's very good at acting, according to Dorian. She's so good that Dorian liked her acting more than her real personality itself. He wanted to make her a big-time star by giving her great opportunities. He knew that if the world discovered Sybil Vane, it would worship her, and Dorian would enjoy the fact that she was Dorian's wife, and the world wanted her. Dorian goes to her show every time she acts, and also he makes quite a friendship with her. They even kissed, and Dorian asked her to marry him. He was very happy and told Lord Henry and Basil to join him next time in Sybil Vane's theatre and see her beautiful acting. They both agreed and went to watch the show. Sybil presented her worst performance to that day. This disappointed Basil and Lord Henry, but they were at least happy that they found a beautiful girl who admired Dorian. This made Dorian both angry and confused. He wanted to see Sybil after the show had ended. Sybil told him the reason her acting was so good was that theatre is the only thing in her life that kept her alive and gave her life meaning. But now she found someone better who gives her life's meaning, and that person is Dorian, she says. She doesn't need to act anymore because she found him, and that fact filled her with joy. This is the most beautiful and most tragic part of the book, I feel. This confession made Dorian angry beyond repair. He told her that he only liked her because of her acting, and how he could have made her a superstar, but now the only thing Dorian loved about her is gone. She begged Dorian to stay and that she will start acting fantastically again. She begged and cried, but Dorian didn't listen. He storms out of that door and never sees her again. Next day, the news came that Sybil Vane killed herself. Dorian is devastated with guilt, but he is still a naive youth. Lord Henry came and very artistically convinced Gray not to be sad, but to be proud that someone has killed herself over you. That's the best kind of romance you will ever get in your life. Now, I like Lord Henry as a character, but this is not at all a good influence on Dorian. This painting got more ugly after the incident, which annoyed Dorian. Fast forward, 10 years later. Gray is now 31 years old, and he looks the same as he looked when he was 20 years old. He hasn't aged a day, but I can't say the same for his reputation and psyche. He is not naive at this point, not at all. He lost contact with Basil and only talked to Lord Henry. He has committed many immoral acts over the years, believing there are going to be no consequences. But the guilt, the poison, was catching up to him. At the age of 31, Dorian was always frustrated and angry at people for no reason. He may be eternally beautiful, but his soul is aging, or, I should say, rotting like a fungus. His reputation was ruined in the high society at the time. One day, he was walking home at night when he saw Basil after ages. He pretended to not see him and walked away, but Basil saw him, and they both went to Dorian's house for catching up. Dorian was furious at clueless Basil because he had suffered so much because of the portrait that Basil had painted of him. He tricks Basil into coming with him to the storeroom where the painting has been sitting in death silence for years. He showed the painting to Basil, and upon seeing that travesty, Basil was devastated to his core. Words could not come out of Basil's mouth. Dorian takes this opportunity to stab Basil in the back, first to see his devastated reaction, and then proceeds to stab him for more times to make sure he's really dead. This gave Dorian a sense of momentarily fleeting pleasure. He then went to sleep surprisingly easy. Next day, he blackmailed one of his friends who was a chemist and told him to dispose of Basil's body without a trace. His friend committed suicide not long after that incident because of guilt. There is no evidence now of Dorian killing Basil and Basil's mysterious disappearance from society. It's nighttime again, and Dorian thought now that he had murdered Basil, the painting should have gone to normal. Since the painter was dead, he went upstairs in a very hopeful mood. After that, he removed the cloth that was covering the painting and found out that the painting had gotten uglier. A sudden rush of disappointment and fury consumed Dorian. He saw the knife that killed Basil, and in fury, he took that same knife and tried to destroy the portrait with it. A sudden screech of scream came from upstairs and from Dorian's house that many patrolling officers in the neighborhood noticed. His servants, now woken up from their sleep, were terrified of the scream. They went to check upstairs and found what book describes as when they entered, they found hanging upon the wall a splendid portrait of their master as they had last seen him in all the wonder of his exquisite youth and beauty. Lying on the floor was a dead man in evening dress with a knife in his heart. He was withered, wrinkled, and loathsome of visage. It was not till they had examined the rings that they recognized who it was. This is the end of the story. It was a beautiful story by Oscar Wilde, and I highly recommend you to go read it yourself. It's very beautifully written. Wilde's writing is just gorgeous, and the way he says things is just poetically charming. I'm pretty sure I did not do justice to the story. Alright, my thoughts. I think Wilde is trying to tell us that we should never obsess over things we can't control, in this case, Dorian's looks. I can relate to this very much because I too am a conventionally attractive male, and I too used to over-obsess over my looks because society told me how good I look. Dorian is so caught up by society's expectations that even a minor of the smallest of things bothers him if it's about his youthful charm and looks. If the awareness is on self for preserving what others like about you, then it's always going to end up in psychological destruction of the mind. Also, I liked Lord Henry as a character, but he is not at all a good influence for young and naive Dorian at the time. And after, he bombarded Dorian with worshipping comments and then told him how he is going to lose it all. Lord Henry is creatively nihilistic and he made Dorian creatively nihilistic, but the difference is Dorian has high expectations for his looks by the high society at the time. This puts Dorian in a very negative setting following his demise. Alright, that's it for this video. I know this is a long one. I was lazy to edit, but I kept writing the script. Like, subscribe and check out my Linktree. Bye.